Hi, good morning, and thank you all for joining us for this Breaking Into the VFX Industry panel presented by Bournemouth Film School at AUB. We're going to be discussing all the things visual effects, including how it's been impacted by COVID, the future of the industry, and how you could turn your interest into a career. We're just going to start by going around and introducing ourselves. So can you all learn a little bit about us? Let's start off with Amy.
Yeah, hi guys, happy Friday. My name's Amy Backwell. I am the Emerging Talent Specialist at Industrial Light and Magic London. I started at ILM in 2017 as the studio coordinator before progressing into more of the studio talent group for the London studio. I actually graduated also from the Arts University Bournemouth back in 2015 from the MA and actually the BA degree on animation production. I was also the industry liaison intern at the time, so kind of very similar to Lewis's role, but specifically in animation and VFX. And yeah, I guess the last thing I want to say is I also volunteer for Animated Women UK, which is all about volunteering, like supporting, networking, mentoring women in the VFX and animation industry. So if you're not a member of that and you're a female, then do get in touch. They're a great organisation to be part of. And all ILM female employees also get free membership as well. Thanks.
Cool. Let's go to Lucy.
Hello, I'm Lucy Sturmer. I'm currently a visual effects production assistant at Framestore. I started there in December of last year, so just before COVID. And before that, I graduated from AUB in June of that year.
Thank you, Lucy. And can we talk to Julian, please?
Yep, so I'm Julian Foddy. I'm a visual effects supervisor for ILM. I've been at ILM for about, exactly 5 years now. Before that, I was at Double Negative for about 11 years. And before that, I was completely different. I was a professional DJ and record producer, and then decided to have a change of career. Studied games design at Derby University in the early 2000s, and then sort of by hook or by crook fell into a career in visual effects. As I say, been at ILM for about 5 years, and I seem to be in the lucky position right now of kind of alternating between Star Wars and Marvel related projects. So in the last few years, I've done Spider-Man Far From Home, Solo: A Star Wars Story, and just spent the summer working on 2 projects actually. Mandalorian Series 2, which hopefully everybody is enjoying so far. If anyone's seen episode 2 yet, or episode 10 rather, no spoilers today if we touch on that. And also recently just finished Fast and Furious 9 as well, which will be in cinemas hopefully at some point in the next year if cinemas are open.
And now to Kate.
Hello everyone, my name is Kate Ainsley Racho and I'm currently an MA Games student at Norwich University of the Arts. Like most people in this panel, I was also a graduate of Arts University Bournemouth from last year, and I studied visual effects and production. Currently, I'm pursuing my master's in games, as the main purpose is to understand more about the integration of the games engine into the creation of films and television. So yeah, that's about me for now.
And I am Corinne Cowgill. I am a layout artist for Industrial Light and Magic. Like many other people, I also graduated from AUB. I graduated in 2018. And since then, I've been able to work on great projects like The Mandalorian Season 1, Brave New World, and Aladdin. And I will be hosting and chairing this today. So let's begin with some good questions. Our first questions, which are the burning questions, are obviously about the current situation, coronavirus, and how we're dealing with that. So how has COVID-19 affected production And how do you see it changing visual effects in the future? Can we start with Lucy, please?
Yeah. So obviously I joined Framestore just before coronavirus started, so I got a little taste of visual effects before, so very much studio based. My position involved a lot of setting up meeting rooms and making sure bookings, we could go into those suites. So obviously since work from home, there's been a massive change. We don't have to prep rooms or anything like that anymore, but we have to learn how to communicate effectively as a team through chats, basically, which is a massive ordeal. I don't think a lot of people would have thought that would have been possible before coronavirus. And I think that will have a lasting impact on the future of visual effects, opening up the possibility of remote working and like maybe having that as a permanent thing within the industry.
Do you have anything to add to that with your years of experience and how this is new and different?
Sorry, yeah. Well, let's give you my sort of personal take on it. I was in the middle of a show when the sort of COVID first sort of started kicking off and lockdown became imminent. We were doing Fast and Furious 9, and that was running as a perfectly normal office-based show, dailies every day. And I think that just for about 2 weeks before lockdown started, we started having to try and adopt social distancing measures in the building and trying to restrict the number of people coming into the dailies room at any one time. And that was actually quite difficult. So to be honest, the show almost got a little bit easier when we transitioned into working from home. And in an ILM context, Fast and Furious 9 was the first show to actually deliver whilst in lockdown, with everyone working from home. It was actually an unbelievably smooth experience. So I don't know how it was with other visual effects facilities, but I think the technical department at ILM, particularly in London, but globally, deserve a massive pat on the back for how quickly they were able to adapt and set a system up, which literally 2 weeks before lockdown, they were estimating they could maybe get 1/3 to a half of the staff to be able to work from home. Any more than that, the servers would fall over. It just wasn't possible. And then somehow or other, within about 2 or 3 days of Boris announcing that we'd all got to work from home, they'd got it all working, and literally pretty much everybody was able to work from home straight away. There were a few people who experienced teething problems. So a bit of a comedy example that there was one compositor on Fast and Furious 9 who spent the first 10 days filing shots through Nuke working via a 4G connection on his phone because he didn't have broadband at home and was struggling to get it set up in time. So there's a little bit of a personal experience of what it was like transitioning to working from home. I think, just to perhaps talk about how it's affected different people and whether people are enjoying it. The general consensus across the industry seems to be that most people are quite liking working from home, and it is something that might continue into the future. So that even hopefully sooner rather than later, when COVID is a thing of the past, that people will actually continue to have the option of perhaps working from home 2 days a week, 3 days a week. I do think it's important that for certain things, everybody does get together in the office when they can. I think one thing that we're definitely missing as a company now is the kind of the social aspect of being in the office and the company, the show meetings, company meetings, dailies, but also the little social occasions that we do, like ILM call them ergo breaks, which is where part of the show budget is allocated to just like a drinks or a wine and cheese evening or something. Everybody just gathers in the kitchen and just gets to know each other and have a bit of a laugh. We're definitely missing out on those sort of things right now. And I guess obviously, there's Zoom calls that everyone does, but I do think that it would be. I do hope that in the future we can get to a situation where people can actually congregate at some point. But I definitely think there will be a future where we're working from home, and I guess, in terms of hiring new staff and buildings and things like that, it does mean that visual effects facilities will be able to expand very rapidly if they need to for a certain project, because they can just hire people to work remotely rather than having to find a bigger office space.
Yeah, I think I had a very similar experience when coming home from London, in that we also had a show to deliver, which was Brave New World, which is I think it's currently showing on Sky as well. And we all were very surprised about how easily we were able to transition. I think a lot of people do miss being in the office, but, you know, going to meetings on your laptop is seemingly very easy. Does anyone else have anything to add to that?
So, no, you carry on, Julian.
No, I was going to say, well, one thing for me, of course, is that the daily commute is a darn sight easier. That I don't have to spend 45 minutes on the tube and walk into the office. That I can literally be out of bed and in work within about 10 minutes if need be, which is a bonus.
Kate, what were you going to say?
I was just gonna say how, like, so previously, before I started my master's, I spent a year and a month with Framestore after graduation, and I agree with how the transition from working in the office to having to work at home was quite a nice and seamless transition, especially because I think Framestore handled it quite well, and shout out to everyone that made that possible. But it was a fun experience because I had a chance to work in the studio for a year, and then suddenly COVID happened, and which meant having to work from home. So they were both different experiences, but I think the company made sure that we got the best out of it. So it was still an experience which I learned a lot from. So yeah.
The coronavirus has definitely shuffled up the industry quite a lot in the way that we work and how we work. But it's also shaken up a lot of jobs and recruitment. So this is probably more of a question for Amy, but how do you feel that graduate recruitment is going at the moment in the VFX industry?
Yeah, so I do want to start off by saying that definitely ILM employee retainment and recruitment specifically has been going strong. And show work is looking really hopeful in the next few months. And to Jules's point, yeah, it was really, really impressive how we all adapted, and also how well our junior talent, I think, is being looked after by senior staff. So we are recognising that some people are in studio flats, and, you know, like well-being is a huge thing for us. And so we know that it's not just about having that job and retaining it, but also making sure that you are well and safe in that job. And so a lot of schedules have been flexible to suit. And so that's one thing that I just wanted to kind of mention, that things are flexible, and, you know, people have children, and we've had to be flexible in this time, which has come with bonuses and positives, actually. I would say that, kind of getting some points on our recruitment team, that due to the delay in filming and hesitation, which happened around like March to May time, it has now flooded the graduate talent pool, and so the outcome is that competition is high, and so the talent bar is raising for those graduate positions. As you probably already know, ILM's graduate program did have to get postponed, like I think most graduate positions, but we have been hiring for juniors, and that has been very consistent since March. On our ILM careers site, where you can look what's open at the moment, there are quite a few positions, not many juniors right now, but it changes all the time, like sometimes literally week by week. I know that we are going to be looking for production assistants, and quite a few of them very soon. So if you are interested in production, you are junior, we would love to hear from you. And yeah, I'm sure that any of us can kind of follow up after this call with any pointers on that. In terms of like how you stand out and what sets you apart, I think what's been really useful is from someone that's graduated to now, taking that time to really learn new software, hone your skills. If there's any personal projects you've worked on, we'd love to see that in your application as well. If you've done competitions, I know that Framestore ran something in the summer, which has been great. Oh, unfortunate. Oh, I don't know if anyone can still hear me. One of my panelists can't hear me anymore.
I can still hear
I
you.
can still hear you.
I can hear you.
Okay,
Okay,
all
then.
right, I'll crack on. I did have some more things to say, Corinne. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh no, keep going. Keep going.
Okay, great. So the pandemic opened up a few new directions for career opportunities, which is great. So animation is looking to be it's looking to be huge. I think due to the industry demand, as well as virtual production. So as you probably know, we already have a stagecraft facility that's opening up. There was an expression of interest. We got loads of applications through that, but there will be some roles that are opening up shortly and for junior talent, and including TV and episodic growth, which, Corinne knows a lot more about that in terms of working in TV, but that is such a brilliant career path as well. So I would say have a focus, know your heart and what you'd like to do. I know that a lot of people have to be reskilled and kind of go a slightly different direction, which is fine. But I would definitely recommend sticking to your guns. And if you want to be a roto artist, if you want to be a layout artist, then don't give up on that dream. Like, you can still do it. And I think it's all about just pushing through that confidence and taking feedback and being open to it and building virtual relationships in this time, and reaching out, seeing if someone has time for a call to chat with you.
Yeah,
that's it from me.
Obviously we can't reveal too much, but generally I think what the coronavirus has done is sort of reframed what consumers want to watch and where they want to watch it. And it's not so much in the cinema anymore. And a lot of work is being pushed to TV. And TV is a very good starting ground for graduates and juniors. And I know that all of the shows that have been put on hold over the coronavirus are suddenly all now ramping up. So there definitely will be a huge wave of jobs and openings that we'll need juniors and graduates for. So I think that even though at the moment it's looking a bit grim whenever you look at online job openings and stuff, but I think in the near future, I think it'll be a lot better. Which brings us sort of to our next question of getting into the industry and what subjects should I study if I want to work in visual effects? Should we start with Kate?
Yeah, sure. So for my background, I studied 3 years of VFX at Arts University Bournemouth, and then shortly after that, I then started working for Framestore London, which was a really exciting opportunity to have straight after graduation. So I was very excited for that. But during, I'd say last August this year, that was when I got to a point where I was just thinking how else could I improve my skill set and things like that. And then that's when I realized that there's loads of different ways of getting into the industry. I've met a lot of people in industry that have had different backgrounds, and it just so happened that they have that passion towards film or TV in general, which made them pursue that career in VFX. So currently I'm studying games, and the reason for that is because most especially with The Mandalorian, that was the show that inspired me to pursue this master's and take a gamble and learn more and expand on my skill set. So games, I think, is a good course as well, a way to get into VFX, since ultimately the software we use and the skills you learn and techniques and methodologies are applicable and transferable in regards to VFX. So currently I'm using Maya and learning more about Unreal Engine as well, which both are software that you can use in VFX. So ultimately, there are many ways, many things you can study to get into VFX. But for me, it was through the VFX course at AV. And now with a games background, I can possibly expand my career options more, which I'm very excited about in a year's time when I'll finish my master's. So yeah, I think plenty of different courses you can do.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of different courses and things you can do. I also did the visual effects course at AUB. Pretty linear career progress for me. Lucy, what degree did you say you did?
Yeah, so
Lucy?
Hello?
What do you think people should study if they want to get into visual effects?
Yeah, so I think there's a range of ways you could go about doing it. My choice, so obviously I went into animation production, so I didn't necessarily set out with the mindset of going into visual effects. But I think if you don't know necessarily if it's visual effects, animation, maybe like something that's slightly off to the side, then if you do a kind of more course with a general, like a variety of courses within it, so, you know, 2D, CG animation, you can kind of get a grasp and kind of decide from there. So yeah, I decided to go with CG visual effects part of that course, which then led me to production and frame store.
Nice. Does anyone want to add to that?
Well, I mean, I'm sort of happy to repeat as I said earlier, about how I got started in the industry. As I say, I sort of came out of a music background and then decided to have a change of heart and take up a different career. And my original plan was to study games. And I basically, to sort of give a bit more detail, I signed on for a course at Derby University that was called Digital Entertainment. It was mainly sort of games design and coding. And we only very, very briefly touched on 3D animation, 3D modeling and animation. And there was not really any mention of visual effects or photorealism or anything like that. And that was just something that I kind of discovered on my own as I was learning 3D Studio Max and Maya as part of the course. And the third year of the course was an internship which you had to get for yourself in the games industry. And I actually decided I want to do my internship in visual effects, started applying to the big companies in London and got universally knocked back. Basically said, you know, don't, I guess what, you know, what I'm trying to say to people here is, you know, don't be put off if you get turned away at the first attempt or whatever, keep trying. So I persisted and eventually persuaded Double Negative to give me 2 weeks of unpaid work experience. You know, I'd got to supposedly fill a year of my course with a paid employment, and all I could get was 2 weeks of unpaid work experience. But I took that and was lucky enough on day 9 of the 10 for DNEG to say, look, there's actually a job here if you want it. So I took a role as a match mover, and whilst this is not advice to anybody, I didn't actually go back and finish the degree. I found that what I'd been studying was kind of not actually that relevant anymore to what I wanted to do for a living, and I sort of got my foot in the door at DNEG. So I decided to take the plunge and not finish the degree. And here we are 15 years later on a VFX suit for ILM. So hopefully it turned out to not be that bad a decision. But I guess it's it was a slightly unusual route in.
Yeah, I think talking with lots of people at work, everyone has quite different backgrounds, a lot of variation there as well. I know someone who did a sports psychology course and they're now in the same department as me. I also believe that there's apprenticeships starting in the industry, and there are also different online courses that people can do to better themselves and help build their skill set.
I guess one other thing I would say, just sort of on a kind of broad thing about what people might think about studying, is that visual effects is a marriage very much of technical and artistic, and there are various disciplines that fit more into one or the other. So like pipeline TD is very much very much technical, not really that artistic. Moving over to the other side, something like a matte painter or a concept artist or a texture artist, pretty much entirely art, very little kind of coding or whatever. But I think for anyone who gets into the industry, having a little bit of an understanding of both sides of the coin there are a great skill set to have. So even if you are a technical person and you're doing very technical courses at school or university, you know, just embrace a bit of the artistic side of things as well. Make yourself aware of the, you know, the cinematic arts if you do want to get into visual effects, why directors make their creative decisions, and you know, vice versa. If you are a really arty person studying mainly kind of sort of art-based courses and wanting to come into the more artistic side of visual effects, just be aware a little bit about the sort of the technical side of things. You know, you don't need to sort of, you know, do a computer science degree on the side, but just be a little bit aware of the more technical aspect of the job as well.
Yeah. I think when I started thinking about going into this sort of career, I was really worried that I'd have to learn how to code. And my experience in coding in the job is like that much, really not much at all. And it's all really dependent on the softwares you use. What kind of softwares are everyone using currently?
Shall I take that one first?
Yep, yes, please.
Well, I guess, you know, from an ILM standpoint, in terms of the actual content, visual effects content creation, ILM over the last 10 years or so has moved very much away from our original model of using entirely proprietary software that we'd written ourselves to move using more off-the-shelf software. And there's numerous benefits to that, in that, one, we don't actually have to pay a big team of developers to maintain our software. We just buy the licenses and it actually works. We just have to integrate it in the pipeline. But also it means that new starters can start at the company and are familiar with the tools already. Whereas, Corinne, you're probably an expert on this, in that the one proprietary ILM tool that still persists is Xeno, which is used by the layout department and the creature effects department. But 10 years ago, it was being used by effects, lighting, layout, pretty much everybody. Is that it's kind of an arcane 3D package that works in a slightly different way to anything else people might be familiar with, and in all honesty takes about 6 months to truly get the hang of, which you know, in today's sort of current employment climate isn't ideal. So we want software that people can be using from day one. So, you know, the tools that pretty much everybody will be familiar with, the things that make up the backbone of our pipeline these days: Maya, general 3D workhorse used by animation generalist department; Katana for lighting; Houdini for effects; and Nuke for compositing; and what else have I missed there? Mari and Substance Designer for texturing and surfacing.
Yeah, I think yes, layout is the only department that's still using our proprietary software, which is Xeno. But TV is sort of moving in a direction where you can either use Xeno and take the time to learn it, or you also have the option of using 3D Equalizer, which is what a lot of other companies are currently using. And I think that is just to help that when we get someone new in, they know how to do the work straight away in the same software. They're very familiar with it. And it's that sort of having the ability to quickly integrate them into the team and get work going.
Yeah, I think
anyone else want to talk about the softwares they're using?
Yeah, from production side, I know a lot of Framestore use Shotgun for production, but I know some studios use F-Track. I think it's important, like, those softwares have free trials, you know, to free trial any softwares that you know a company uses before, like, you know, you have an interview or anything, just to show a bit more like how you're able to like use your thoughts to like prepare yourself. But yeah, we use Shotgun. Obviously Microsoft Suite is the standard that you should kind of know, and then also like Google Suite, what we've been using a lot from work from home, so it's also good to familiarize yourself with that if you can.
So our next question is, what do you love most about working in the industry? Who wants to take that one first?
Should I go first?
Yes, please.
Okay. So, apart from the cliche answer saying that is working in films is a passion and having the ability to be creative and technical at the same time is just something that I really enjoy to do. But I think the main thing that I enjoy about VFX is the fact that it's a very social, for me, it's a very, very social career. Because obviously you're working in big teams and all that. You never know who you're gonna expect to be part of that team for that specific project. So it's always exciting to have the opportunity to meet different people, and the fact that even though they may leave the company and move to a different company, you're still in a way interlinked, because you never know that most companies end up working in the same project. So it's a very close-knit industry, but it's so massive at the same time, because there's in regards to numbers. So you never really know when you're going to meet these people again. So that's very exciting. And another thing for me, from my personal point of view as well, is the fact that I got to, at the same time as pursuing the career that I enjoy and love, I also got the opportunity to play the sports that I love. So I got to be a part of the VFX Ad League softball teams. So I was taking part in the Flamestorm team, which was the softball team for Flamestorm, and then that then led me to meeting more people in the advertising and from different advertising companies in London. So it was a great way of socializing as well. So for me, it's the social aspect and the fact that everyone is so friendly and it's just so open to teaching you new things. So it's not terrifying for a junior like myself to ask seniors and people who have had 20 years of experience or so, and they're just so friendly and lovely that it makes it easier to just want to learn more, because there are people that are eager to teach you.
Mm. Well, what do I love about working in the VFX industry? I would say, so I work in the TV part, and what I really like about my job is the variety of shots and shows that I get to work on. In films, there's usually like one very long sequence that a company will get, and all the shots look very similar, and you have to work on all of them, and it can be several months of just looking at very similar stuff. Whereas in TV, it's a different scene, it's a different environment every other week, and I really enjoy that sort of fast-paced change. I really enjoy the sort of adaptability of the team as well. I'll add to Kate's thing about like the people you work with are really wonderful. It's really nice to be working with loads of people who are very similar and working with the same kind of passion that you work with. And it's very exciting to see how the future of visual effects is sort of developing and changing, and it's exciting to be part of that. Does anyone want to add anything, or should I move to the next question?
I mean, well, I guess I'll say one more thing. As a question is, what do I love most about working in the visual effects industry? I think it's changed over time as I've moved through being an artist and into a supervisor. That I guess my comments would have been very much the same when I was working as an artist. That the main thing really was just how cool it was to see something that you'd worked on then appear on screen in something like Star Wars or a Marvel film, 6 months to a year later, and just been able to sort of say I did that. As I moved up into sort of supervisory roles, interestingly, some of the things that I actually enjoyed most about the job are not actually the traditional parts of the job. So as a VFX super, I actually love, I kind of love a lot of the travel that's involved with shooting films and going out on set. And that's something that may not actually be a part of the job anymore. Maybe it's something that we'll get to in the next section when we're talking about the future and virtual production and how that's going to impact the industry. I do think that perhaps things like disappearing off to some far-flung corner of the world for 6 months at a time, like I used to get to do, maybe a thing of the past. And so, sometimes there's a point where as a VFX soup, I actually almost, don't get me wrong, I'm in no way complaining about what my job is. I love it, and I wouldn't change it for the world. But I do sometimes miss doing shots myself, and that kind of ability to pop the headphones on, get some decent music on, and kind of lock in for hours and hours at a time and just focus on some really cool shot work. Whereas as a supervisor, I sort of tend to spend an awful lot of time talking and in meetings, and sometimes get sick of the sound of my own voice and wish I could just jump back on a computer and do shots again. That's not to say that I don't. I sometimes sort of do an extra couple of hours after work every day just doing shots. There's a sequence coming up on Mandalorian Series 2, I think it's episode 5, where some characters sit around a campfire. I won't say any more than that. And I basically just spent every evening for a month doing little flies buzzing around that campfire, just because it was a little extra touch we wanted to add in. And just to give myself an excuse to jump back in and do shots again, I volunteered to do that myself.
So we're going to move on to our next segment, which is about the future of the VFX industry. And we're going to start off with something that's been talked about a lot this year in terms of diversity and how we can improve diversity in the industry. And I'm going to pass this one to Amy.
Yeah, so I was really, really keen to take this one on because I am part of the diversity and inclusion group at ILM, and just for a long, long time, I've always been super passionate about that specific area for women, but also, just kind of wanted to say that the whole industry, I think, is talking about a lot of things in this space anyway. So it's not just ILM, but we do have new employee resource groups at ILM. So one is a women's network called Circuit, which is fantastic, and we're looking at like all women or gender neutral individuals joining that, looking at mentorship. We know that upskilling women in the industry is really important, because let's just face it, there is a lack of female VFX and CG supervisors across the industry, and so we're trying to change that specifically, but it's definitely hopeful. And we just understand that women need to potentially have women mentors as well as male mentors, because there are a lot of amazing men in the industry that care about that as well. So that's one thing I just wanted to say, that there are amazing men that really do champion that. And we also have a people of colour network called Mosaic, which is fantastic. There's been a lot of fantastic events that have been happening since Black Lives Matter. And I'm also running the group for neurodiversity and disabilities called Enabled, which is really exciting because it's starting to really look at the stigma of what neurodiversity and disabilities disabilities have. And me being ADHD, I know that I've kind of been quite challenged throughout my life, and it's been something that not many people talk about, actually, in comparison to gender and race and things like that. So I just wanted to kind of mention that we're trying to recognise that this industry attracts a lot of neurodiverse people that might have autism or dyslexia, and including other physical disabilities. And so we are trying to have a support group for that, talk about it, but more importantly, look at how we can accommodate the industry, and because email communication and other forms of communication doesn't always work for everyone. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is don't be scared of wondering if this industry is right for you, if you have something, because we would love to hear from you, and we would love to know how we can accommodate the company to suit your needs as well. So yeah, don't be afraid is my point. I don't know if anyone else wants to hop on that one.
Yeah, I'll agree with the neurodiversity one. Like, I'm dyslexic, and I'm really good with spatial awareness. I love it. So I love layout work because it's all about integrating the 2D plates with 3D. But it takes me half an hour to write a proper email response back to someone. So there's definitely those sorts of challenges, but there are a lot of neurodiverse people in our company. I would say. And on the women's representation in the industry, I would also say, it's currently about, I think it's about 20% female and 80% male, as far as I know. And that's very reflective of what my class was like at uni. So my class at uni was, I think, less than 30, and maybe there were six women. And it's the same at work. So I think we're in a team of about, it's hard because I can't see them every day. So I think we're about 20 or so. And we've got 5 women at the moment as well. So it's definitely balancing out. I know it's balancing out more in junior roles at the moment. And so overall there is improvement. But it's definitely a sort of, it's one of those ones that's going to take a lot of time. Does anyone want to add to that?
So
No?
are we now on to audience questions, or are we still got some ones from the future section to tackle?
We've still got future questions, so let's move on to the next one. There's been a big move towards real-time film making using engines created initially for the gaming industry. How do you see it affecting the future of visual effects? So this is sort of similar to what ILM's been doing with real-time stagecraft stuff. I'm sure, Julian, you know a lot more about it than I do.
Yeah, I'll take this one. So I think ILM were very much at the front of the charge with stagecraft and virtual production, as we call it, which covers, it's not just the sort of LED screens, but virtual production is a whole suite of tools that in some cases do use real-time technology. And, you know, shameless plug now, anybody who's joining my talk at, I think it's 1:30, this is what I'm going to cover today. But I gather there was somebody talking about virtual production yesterday, and also Paul Franklin from Double Negative will be talking about it later this afternoon. I guess to come back to the question, real-time tech and how is that going to affect visual effects? I think that the main way that real-time stuff is going to affect us in the future is not actually, it's not going to change the way we actually do visual effects for film or TV too much in terms of an artist's daily work. You know, we're still going to be rendering things a traditional way. The renders might get faster, but we're never going to switch to using a real-time render engine for the final content of composites and things like that. I don't think. But what I see is that real-time stuff is going to plug in, particularly in the areas of virtual production, as we call it, and very much be involved in the pre-production and the actual production, and maybe even taking things away from post-production and putting them into production, which is exactly what's happened with Mandalorian, where shots that would have traditionally have been post-production visual effects shots are actually captured in camera because you've done the visual effects in advance, piped that into LED content that's on a screen, and shot the whole thing with a camera, and therefore it's no longer a visual effects shot. You've done the visual effects in advance. That's one example, but also other things that I'll touch on when my talk is how we're using Unreal Engine and real-time to do almost real-time previs, using, you know, to giving a director a virtual camera, and was something that might have taken several iterations and weeks of time with previous artists working in Maya, getting feedback from a director about camera moves, reworking it, going back to the director and getting notes and so on. You can now actually just give the camera to the director and say, right, shoot it how you want, and you put the camera where you want, and he can just walk around an empty room and film the scene with a virtual camera. So that's another area we're moving into. And this has been used a lot on exactly the techniques I've just described. That's been used a lot on Jurassic World, both the previous Jurassic World film, Fallen Kingdom, and the next one, which I think is called Dominion. David Vickery, the visual effects supervisor on that, was very keen to give Colin Trevorrow this sort of virtual camera setup. So that's how the whole movie almost has been prevised, with Colin just using these virtual cameras to kind of do his own camera moves and streamline the process. So those really, that's where I see real-time really sort of having an impact on our industry more than particularly changing the day-to-day work of sort of standard visual effects artists working on standard type shots.
Does anyone want to talk about AI or VR? So it's, with the goggles and things. Do you feel like that's becoming more of a commonplace thing in our industry or not?
I can take this one as well, because it ties into part of what Stagecraft, the ILM's virtual production suite offers, and I'm pretty sure that the other facilities have got stuff that kind of does the same thing as well. So one area where virtual reality and VR headsets definitely comes into play is location scouting, and particularly in the COVID era, location scouting was always quite an expensive business, and actually was really just a bit of a jolly for the heads of department, in all honesty. And that sort of 5 or 10 people would hop on a first-class flight to somewhere far-flung corner of the world and go and wander around these places with cameras, decide where they wanted to shoot, and then go and have fancy meals, and then fly back, and then 3 months later they'd go out there and shoot the movie there. But obviously with COVID and travel restrictions, that sort of thing isn't possible now. But even before COVID, we were moving towards this kind of model where you would send just an advanced team, a scanning team, who would just go and photograph and scan a location. And then the heads of department, the director of photography, etc., they don't actually have to leave home or leave the production office. Once you've got the remote data from this location in, someone can feed that all through to the photogrammetry software, put that into Unreal Engine or Unity, and then feed that onto a VR headset like an Oculus Quest. And if you've got the right technology and tools like ILM Stagecraft, you can actually hold a multi-user location scout entirely virtually. Everyone's in the same location, they can wander around, but everyone can go off and do their own thing. So the director can go to one portion of the virtual set or location and decide what angles he wants to shoot from, what he wants in the background, what might need to be changed about that location. Similarly, the director of photography could be over at another spot deciding where he wants to put the lights, where green screens might need to be, and then other things such as actually the visual effects supervisor can be in virtual reality looking at what the director's planning on shooting and already getting an idea about what the visual effects in those shots might be like. How many. This is something I'll mention in my talk, because we use this on Star Wars Episode 9 for that big festival sequence on, I think the planet was called Pasanda or something like that. All those hundreds of extras, that was all worked out in VR in advance, so that they knew what directions they were going to be looking in, how wide the camera moves were going to be. And then actually in the VR setup, we're able to throw in hundreds and hundreds of proxy 8 little cylinders representing those extras, and worked out how many crowd extras they needed to hire. So it helps a lot of departments, because situation like that where you're planning for a shoot out, I think in Jordan, you've got to send 200 extra out there. They actually needed to know in advance how much food they were going to need, how much cloth they were going to need to make all those extras gowns. That was all facilitated by having planned this out in VR first, which is it's kind of exciting. So that, I think, is probably one example of where virtual reality comes into play. Another example, I think, and we use this on Transformers, was allowing directors or production designers to get a look at a finished product as a real thing that they can walk around. So Michael Bay used this on Transformers to actually visualize the robots in VR and walk around them, and you can kind of stand at Optimus Prime's feet and look up at him. So I guess that's another possibility, and it's something that I'd be quite keen to do if I was working on a big creature show or something like that, is perhaps give the director an opportunity to meet his creatures or characters in VR before filing them.
Yeah, I think VR is getting very interesting, and ILM layout is all about integrating, and is that go-between between filming and the rest of the visual effects process. And there are people in my own team that are being encouraged to sort of branch out and learn more skills, especially in softwares like Unreal Engine. And we're like updating our pipeline to allow us to have time to learn those things as well. We've just got 2 more questions of our own, and then we're going to move on to more of like a free-form chat and answer some of the audience's questions. So our penultimate question is, what are you most excited for in the future of the industry? Does anyone want to take that one?
I'll go first again on this. So I think it's something to be excited about, but it's also slightly something to, I don't want to be scare anyone, but artificial intelligence, really, I think that's going to be something that we see having a massive impact on the industry. And actually, it was mentioned in the previous question as well, wasn't it? And I chose not to answer it there, but I'll do it here instead. AI neural networks are already starting to have an effect on how we do things in the industry, and it's only going to get more and more involved. Some examples of how we use it now: we're using AI denoisers to allow us to keep render times down. We render things at lower quality and then just use AI to denoise it. We may even get to the point where we only need to render every other frame, and then AI will interpolate those frames. Some departments that are probably already aware of developments that will impact their industry are things like Paint and Racho. There's already demo videos around of how AIs can just remove people from videos and paint in the background just using neural networks. What I would say though is I don't see that Racho and Paint are going to be out of a job, or that those departments are going to disappear. I think what will happen is that perhaps those job roles will change from actually really physically doing the work, drawing out those Racho splines and animating them, making the brush strokes, into a case of a role of you're doing that, but you're corralling the AI and steering the network and making the creative decisions for the network, changing the settings, so there'll still be an operator for the software. It's just that the departments will perhaps do slightly different jobs. Similarly, AI, things like facial animation, match move and lay, body match animation and layout and things like that. We're definitely not far off a point where you could sort of point an AI at a bit of footage and say, right, well, that's a person there, track that person's movements through 3D space without me having to do anything. And I'm sure that there's neural networks that can spot where all the joints in a person's body are and do a pretty accurate body track or match animation without human interference, which is, so we will be using artificial intelligence for a lot of kind of labor saving and time consuming tasks. But as I say, hopefully it's not going to put people out of jobs. It's just going to be that those jobs are slightly different and you're steering the neural networks rather than manually doing the work yourself.
Anyone got any other things that they're excited for in the future?
Yeah, I want to take
Amy.
something. Yeah, so I think what I'm most excited about being the person that manages our work experience programs and apprenticeships and other entry-level programs and and things that make the industry a lot more accessible. I think the exciting thing is a much more diverse pool of folks entering into the industry. And I think with that, people bring all sorts of new ideas and thoughts, and just people's backgrounds alone is really making a positive change in the show content. Even if you can't really necessarily see it at the moment, I definitely think that that the industry is changing, and people who are coming up with ideas are there's a kind of a fresh representation. And to Corinne's point, there's a lot more accessible routes now than just a typical degree way. So apprenticeships, there's a junior 2D standard at the moment, and we have an apprentice doing very well in that at ILM at the moment. There's the ATD standard, which is a lot more kind of like a pipeline TD role. So if you're into kind of coding and Python and technology, that would be a great route for you. And other standards coming in like animation and concept art, etc. And what that does is it means that people can come in if they're from a low income background, they get paid. It's a lot more the other way. So it's 80% in work and 20% at college. And then there's also things like T-levels, and we're rolling out a school leaver program, hopefully in the new year, which should, hopefully be open to a lot more people. So that's what I'm excited about.
I saw Kate raise her hand slightly then.
Yeah,
What are you
I was just
excited
gonna
about?
quickly add,
Sure.
yeah. It's just a small thing that I'd like to add from the perspective of a junior in regards to hoping to pursue more advancements in VFX as a career. So for me, it's mainly just about the innovative advancements in technology that's exciting for me, because currently I'm learning new software, new content, and new techniques basically to apply which in VFX. So for me, that's very exciting to just kind of see this pretty much just happen in front of you, and in a way kind of be a part of it and have that eagerness to learn more about it. So yeah, I'm very much excited for what's to come, and especially currently with Corona that's amidst all of us, there's certainly a lot of area for change, and there's loads of developments being done which in order to accommodate that situation better. So I think there's plenty more changes that's going to happen in regards to how VFX is conducted in the future.
Awesome. And this is our last question until we move on to audience questions. What is your main concern for the future of the industry? Something you're not excited about?
I'll happily jump in on that one first. I mean, this for me, from a supervisory point of view, I'll give my take, but then I'll cover the same thing perhaps from an artist point of view, which is, I guess my main concern right now, because I'm kind of seeing this in projects that we're about to start up on, or projects that we're bidding, is constricting budgets. With COVID, I guess, and the fact that an awful lot of movies might actually find their final home as streaming, we're going to see potentially a sort of a tightening of the purse strings by the big studios to try and make their tentpole movies on essentially a TV budget. I don't think they're not going to slash the cost by half, but they're already, the days of perhaps a studio spending 300 million on a film might be gone for the foreseeable future. But I don't want to particularly name any names here, but I'll throw Marvel under the bus. I might as well. I don't see Marvel, starting up on a major movie project and saying we're okay if the visual effects quality isn't as high as we would normally expect. They're going to want the same standard of work, but they're going to want to pay less for it. So from a supervisory point of view, at least for the foreseeable future, that means, having to try and box clever and think of new efficient ways that we can do that level of work in a shorter amount of time. It's not entirely possible in all cases. And I guess from an artist point of view, for anyone who's on those shots, that means you're actually going to get less time to do the shots than you would normally have had perhaps in a film context. I'd love to say that was just going to be a sort of temporary problem while COVID is on, and as soon as if the cinemas open again, then Marvel and the other studios would quite happily put their budgets back up again. But the reality is that if we manage to pull it off and do the work for them for cheap for the next couple of years, or the next year, that'll be what the prices are ultimately. So that would be my main concern, is that the budgets will squeeze while the standard and the quality of the work will not.
Any other concerns about the future? I think one of the things I'm concerned about is that we don't know if we're actually ever going to go back to the office completely. We don't know if working from home is going to be the set thing for, indefinitely, I suppose. or whether we'll eventually go back, because it's very nice. It is very nice to be in the office with other artists and talking to them and asking for help and things. And it does throw up problems when there's like training issues, but I suppose there's a lot we can do remotely as well.
It's something that I've noticed, and it's been a concern of mine actually with the sort of move to working from home, and you know, what is the long-term plan, is that I do hope we can get back into having a couple of days a week in the office if we want it, because I think it only dawned on me a month or so ago that for anyone who's new to the industry, who started in the industry, you know, who hasn't even had the chance to experience working in the office, you don't know how much they're missing out on. Like thinking back to when I started in visual effects, what I knew on day one at Double Negative versus what I knew on day 30 or whatever, I learned all of that from being in the office and from, you know, soaking that up like a sponge from the people that were sat around me, looking over people's shoulders, asking what they were doing. You know, often people who weren't even in my department. And you know, and I guess as a junior or a new starter in a company, that we don't have that. Whereas we can replace actually standard meetings with Zoom calls, and all the relevant conversations are had, and we can still do dailies and look at the pictures. But it's the corridor conversations, it's the conversations over people's shoulders and things like that that we're missing out on. So yeah, I think we do have to find a way to get that back, even whether it's everyone being in person in the office or another way.
Awesome. I think that's all of our own questions, and we've got a lot of audience questions. Before we move on to the audience questions, is there anything anyone else wants to talk about before we move on? No? Great. Cool. Let's start answering some of these questions. So, audience question. What upcoming projects are you most looking forward to?
We can't say too much, can we, Julian?
No, I mean, I guess it's a kind of difficult question to answer, in that what upcoming projects do I know about that have been done and I'm most looking forward to seeing on screen, or what upcoming projects am I most looking forward to working on? That second one I can't answer. You know, my next project should be pretty exciting, hopefully, but I can't say what that is right now. In terms of what I'm excited to see, well, you know, Mandalorian Series 2, I think it's going to provide a very, very nice distraction in the run-up to Christmas from all the other stuff that's going on in the world. The final few episodes particularly, which we worked on here at ILM London, are particularly exciting. If you thought the sort of kind of Easter eggs, etc., in episode 9 were cool, wait till we get to the tail end of the series.
Yeah, I think it's in our contract, so we actually can't talk about upcoming shows. But if you go on the ILM website, you can look at the in-production shows that we've got going on. So there's Jurassic World Dominion, The Midnight Sky. Yep, season 2 of Mandalorian's on there. And also
Lost
Black
Ollie.
Widow as well. Lost Ollie. Yeah, I found that ILM's really
going to be
kind
pretty
of
cool
diversifying on some of the shows as well. Yeah. Again, you can't ask this one. We can't answer this one. Julian, are you working on the next Spider-Man?
Well, I can answer that, in the answer is no. I did have a chat to people. I have spoken to the people who are doing it. They wanted to ask my advice about some of the New York stuff we did on Spider-Man 2. But sadly, I think it was the case that ILM were actually too busy to even try and get involved. Unfortunately, we just didn't have the capacity to even bid on it. So no, it was never actually an option.
Cool. So there's a few questions about teams. How many people are in your team? I'm going to start with Lucy because you haven't spoken for a while. How many people in your team, Lucy?
Oh my god, like if we're talking the people like just in my production team, there's maybe like 15 of us. Maybe like in general on my project, there's a lot. There must be like across all departments like 100 or something like that. But it really depends, I guess, which department you're talking about and per project, I guess, on the scale. So yeah.
Yeah, someone's asked how many people are in my team, and I said 20. 20 is for the full layout department at ILM, but in TV, there's just 3 of us at the moment, actually. And we've kind of got a show each as well. So we're very, very busy at the moment. That's definitely a department that's looking to expand in the new year. So if you're interested, do email Amy, do email the company. How big is your department, Amy?
My department? Well,
people might
just
be interested
working on
in your department.
Just working on emerging talent. Really, it's myself and our VFX trainer called Davey Stein, who we've just had transfer over from Escape Studios, so that's pretty great. There's about 4 or 5 in HR. There's about 3 or 4 in recruitment, but some of them are part-time, and I think there's about 5 in talent they're working in talent management. Oh, and we also have Abby, who's our training coordinator. So yeah, there's actually a lot of different roles in the support areas. So I think, yeah, we don't really talk about that, but it's something really important to say. Like, if you really enjoy project managing, and specifically production isn't necessarily the route for you, and you're more about kind of ideas and getting people together and managing events and different projects and outreach and things like that, then yeah, I think a career in support is brilliant. Yeah, we're always looking for new people, so definitely consider that.
Cool. I suppose another question on the end of that is, are there extra production jobs to cater to for stagecraft, or in the future of stagecraft? I would say there definitely are. I've seen a lot of internal job postings about stagecraft at the moment. There's another question about how many stagecraft sets there are. I think there's only 1 at the moment in San Francisco. And I don't know if they're building more, actually.
I'll answer that. Yes. Yeah, there are. Well, there's one. The main one is actually, sorry to correct you there, Corinne. It's actually in LA. It's the one that's used for Mandalorian is in Manhattan Beach, which is just near Venice in LA. That was the main one we built. However, this is public knowledge, so it's fine. There are several others under construction globally. So we're actually building one in Australia, and we're building one in London. And the technology is also sort of available to do as a floating setup. So we've actually got a setup that's been used on a couple of shows recently. So the what's it called? Is it called the Midnight Sky? The George Clooney thing. We did some everything for that, and also there's a superhero movie that's filming in Britain right now that's also using it. So the LED panels go into the actual movie set, and they're there for sort of views out of the windows. So it's stagecraft's capacity is expanding massively globally, and it's something that we were planning on doing, but actually the timing with COVID-19 couldn't have been sort of more perfect, in that it's not an elastoplast for the film industry. You can't simply use it to make an entire film, but it solved a lot of problems for certain productions, and will do in the future, as to how you can kind of shoot an exotic location without actually taking an entire film crew there.
Cool. And does stagecraft mean productions can now be completed quicker? with less time needed in post?
Yes, it doesn't necessarily mean less visual effects work. It just means that you perhaps do it at different times. So in the context of The Mandalorian, what it means is that 90% of the sort of environments, these Star Wars planets, all actually have to be made. The CG versions have to be made before the shooting starts, so that can all be fed into the content as the LEDs, and that's what's behind Mando and Baby Yoda when they're walking around. So you have to do it in advance. It doesn't mean it takes any less time. It just means that the 5 or 6 weeks that you'd spend building that CG environment, you do it before the shoot rather than in post production. And even the shots that come off stagecraft, they're not all in camera finals. There was a lot of stuff on Mandalorian Series 2 where you still need to make little tweaks. You just need to make corrections to fix the join between the ground and the LEDs, or make minor color corrections, or there's things like lens flare that you don't want. But as a general answer to the question, yes, stagecraft should, in theory, compress the post-production schedule, and it should compress the post-production budget, but it won't compress the overall schedule, and it won't compress the overall budget.
Cool. There's a lot of questions about stagecraft. How big are the VFX teams on the set for stagecraft? I don't actually know how big the teams are, but I know there is a brain bar. Oh, you do?
It's funny.
Go ahead.
Pretty much all the answers to this, and I'm not trying to sort of, again, give a shameless plug, but anyone who's joining for my talk in about an hour's time, I will be covering all of this. So the team that are on set for stagecraft, depends how big a project it is, how many different scenes and different environments are being used. So for something like Mandalorian, the team needs to be quite large because there's lots and lots of different environments. Perhaps on the George Clooney movie, Midnight Sky, where it was just the one Icelandic sort of environment that needed slightly less people out there. But sort of as a general rule, to give an overview of the team on set, inside the volume at any given time, you're going to have the director, you're going to have the director of photography, and you're going to have the actors. And from visual effects, you're going to have the visual effects supervisor. But they're in more of a sort of a creative role, just with the director and director of photography. Actually running stagecraft from inside the volume is the virtual art department supervisor. And he's the person that's basically sort of controlling the position of the LED content, how bright it is, or via what's called the brain bar, which is a team of artists that sit outside the volume. They're just off to the side, all sitting, working lots of computers, each with a different role. So one person will be looking after the Unreal Engine stuff, the actual game, making sure that the content in that is correct and correctly, lighting is correct. There's another person who'll be looking after things like any animation that needs to be done. Someone else looking after color, making sure that everything is the correct color and it's matching up to the practical set. And then one other person who's just sort of doing pipeline and data management. So for every shot that's shot on the volume, you actually save a version of that as a bake, and then that means that if half an hour later or 2 months later the director decides they want to reshoot that shot, you can just load up the same scenario and all the lighting, etc., will be the same. That all has to be stored out, but it's also actually all feeding in and out of the ILM pipeline. That information comes directly off stagecraft and feeds into the ILM system, so that when you come to do the same shot in VFX in post, you can actually pull in the assets and the renders from the stagecraft bake, what went up onto the LEDs. We can pull that into Nuke and just check we're getting the same results. So there's quite a bit of sort of pipeline work and tie-in. So to answer the question, I think a minimum size team for stagecraft is going to be about 6 people, but up to about 12 or 18.
Nice. Well, since you're doing a talk about it later, we'll just do one more question for stagecraft, which is, can independent films use the virtual production stages? And is this more cost effective than traditional VFX or not? I would say it's not as cost effective. I bet it's really expensive.
Yeah, it's it's very expensive. You know, if you were sort of making your own sort of short film or independent feature film, the budget is probably not going to be there to afford to use ILM stagecraft. That's not to say that there probably aren't cheaper versions of it, you know, that are being built. I'm sure, you know, there's a lot of companies now are offering virtual production solutions. Whether they're all quite as complete to set up as stagecraft, where you've got a full 360, you know, football field size LED volume, probably not. You know, but don't forget also the content that goes into the LEDs doesn't come from nowhere. Like I mentioned earlier, there's an awful lot of visual effects work needs to go into prepping that content, and an awful lot of visual effects work costs probably an awful lot of money. So I think for now, for the foreseeable future, you know, it's not a budgetary solution for independent filmmakers. But what it does do is offer sort of bigger productions where you might, you know, to ship an entire film unit out to a location, you might be talking about 150 people. Well, you can actually just do that in stagecraft with perhaps 50 in total or something like that. That includes like things like set builders and carpenters, and that's what all those extra people are on top of the stagecraft crew. Then it does offer budgetary advantages. Yes.
Nice. So we're going to answer a different question. We're going to move away from stagecraft. This one's for Lucy. What is the day-to-day of a VFX production assistant?
Well, it's a lot of Google Calendar, basically, in summary. So basically, a lot of my job is making sure people are free to attend meetings and they're not double booked in their meetings. There's a lot of emails, like moving around notes from clients, making sure they get in to where they need to be, to who they need to see. When we have plates from set that have been provided, I need to make sure that they are ingested and that they're with the artists. But yeah, it's basically a lot of manual admin-y type things. And I guess if we weren't in a work from home scenario, which we are, it would be, you know, making sure that meeting rooms are available, you know, just basically being there to support the rest of the production team with whatever they need.
Yeah. And what kind of career development is there in VFX production?
So you kind of come in, I know a lot of people that were production assistants started as runners. So you start as a runner, or you come directly into production assistanting, and then you can kind of go up to coordinator, line producer, and that side of things. I know some people end up going into bidding once they've become like a line producer or producer. You know, some people go into recruitment, or like head of production, those kind of pathways. But yes, basically all types of artist management.
And what is bidding for projects?
I am not sure. It's a little bit above me, but
Julian,
maybe answer. Yeah, Julian, go on.
Yeah, it's something I spend an awful lot of my time doing. Well, you know, bidding for projects is how we win the work. So whenever a studio is going to make a movie, it's very rare that they've decided in advance what visual effects company is going to do that work or do all of it. Probably the one exception to that rule, of course, is Star Wars and ILM. That it's guaranteed that ILM are always going to be the main visual effects vendor on anything Star Wars. But we do actually get other companies to do the work as well, so they have to go through a bidding process. But you know, from my point of view, whenever we're up for working on a Marvel film, we have to go through a bidding process. And how that works is that when the script is first written, the client side visual effects supervisor and visual effects producer will do a breakdown of the script, which is basically where they go through shot by shot or by sequence and say, right, in this sequence, we're going to need to have environment extensions, we're going to need to have CG vehicles, we're going to need to have creatures, we're going to need to have explosions. So, you know, the bid will say, right, how much is it going to cost to make all of these set extensions, all of these CG creatures, develop all these CG explosions, etc., etc. And then once we've got those assets, as we'll call them, how much will it cost to put them into 200 shots? And maybe of those 200 shots, there might be 50 that are easy, 50 that are hard, and 100 that are medium. And so what we'll try and do is put together, myself and a producer will put together a spreadsheet that says, right, for these assets, as we call them, which is the extensions or the set extensions, the characters, this is going to take a modeler 10 weeks to do. It's going to take a texture artist 5 weeks to do. It's going to take a rigger 6 weeks to do. That all gets added up and totals up to generate a price which we charge to the client, or we ask to charge the client, and then the same for the shots, that will work out how many days of roto, how many days of paint, how many days of animation, how many days of lighting, how many days of comp will it take to do a medium shot, and then times that by the number of medium shots, add that all together, and this is the kind of thing that goes off to the client. And then you enter into a bit of a trading process where, you know, let's say, for example, our bid came out at, for argument's sake, £10 million for an entire movie. It sounds like a lot of money. The clients might come back and say, well, we thought we were going to pay 8 for this, 8 million. So we'll then go away and do another bit on the bid where we'll say, okay, well, we can reduce it by this much, but only if you agree not to do this. So the creature can only have one head, not 2, you know, that kind of thing. And what will happen is that there'll be several visual effects companies all doing the same thing at the same time, feeding into the studios, and then the studios will effectively, you know, normally give the work to whoever comes out the cheapest in the bid. You know, you'd like to think, of course, that it's who is going to do the best work and that it all goes to the right people, but ultimately a lot of it is driven by whoever is the cheapest. Hopefully answers that one.
Yes, that does. I quite like this question, although I might have to ask Amy about this one. Do you get a free Disney Plus subscription for working on The Mandalorian?
Hang on, I'm just trying to think about. No, I think we can say, so typically all of us that work for Disney, ILM, would get a free entrance pass into all of the parks and resorts, which also lets another 3 people in, like family or friends, for free as well. However, because we can't visit the parks anytime soon, they offered Disney subscription for free instead for a year. So it's kind of like one or the other. So I took the Disney Plus subscription. I don't think there's anything more to say on that one. Not just because you worked on The Mandalorian, basically, but because you are an employee of Disney and ILM.
The monetary value of a Disney Plus, the monetary value of a Disney Plus subscription compared to unlimited passes to Disney theme parks,
I know,
they're not quite.
It didn't weigh up.
Before COVID, I took my family to Euro Disney and we met some friends there, and I think that we saved sort of like €500 or something on park admission in one trip. So it's a very nice little company perk to get that working for Disney.
Yeah, it was nice to get Disney Plus though, because I was like, I'm not going to go to Disney Paris anytime soon. I'll take Disney Plus, please. And it was great because I got to watch The Mandalorian, and I kept annoying my dad by pausing it and going, "That's my shot, and that's my one. Oh, and that one as well." And he went, "No, I just want to watch the thing." So it's been nice having that as a nice little lockdown perk. Someone's also put, will there be a Mandalorian season 3? I don't know, actually. Oh yeah, definitely. Cheers.
I mean, think it's very.
It's likely.
Yeah.
We don't know though. Kate, how similar is the CG side of VFX to games?
I mean, ultimately, if it's pretty much the same, but I think in this context, it's all about, like, say, for example, from a university's point of view, they may have a specific curriculum, so they're only going to teach certain software content, like for modeling, texturing, and look developing, and those who got in that regard for CG. But with my background at AUB, I mainly did my modeling, texturing, and all sorts of things with ZBrush, Maya, and Mari. So those were the top 3 software that I used. So in turn, I am more well versed with those software. But then again, most 3D softwares you can like transfer skills, but it's just down to one's preference. Like some of my peers currently right now for my MA Games course, some of them prefer to use Blender, which is a free 3D software, which because they're more well versed with it, so they use that for their own projects. But for me, I'm still using Maya because I have more experience with that, and I believe that it is more updated in regards to industry, since that is this main 3D software that is more used on a more larger scale in regards to all VFX studios or game studios as well. Well, some game studios. But ultimately, it is down to the software that you're used to, since, like I said, all skills are transferable and applicable in whatever software. And as long as you have the understanding in regards to modeling, texturing, and look development, then you can pretty much have that knowledge to start off with any software that you'd like to partake, which would involve the creation of CG assets.
Nice. That's a good answer. That was a really good answer.
Thank you.
Cool. Fun question. What's your favorite show / film you've worked on?
For me, so because I started last year with Framestore, and my first ever film was James Bond: No Time to Die, and I'm still waiting for it to be released. I've been waiting because it was meant to be released this year in April, but because of COVID, it got pushed back to November. So I was very excited when I told my family, "Oh, it's coming for November. We can watch it in lockdown." But then it got pushed back again to April. And it's quite funny for me because I also worked on Tom and Jerry and The Midnight Sky by George Clooney. And out of all those 3 films, the last film I got to work and partake in industry, which was The Midnight Sky, is the first film that I'm going to see out of all 3, which is coming out this December. It's a little frustrating, but I am very much excited. But at the same time, I can't believe that the first film that I worked on is the last film I'm going to see.
Nice.
Yeah,
Julian, what's your favorite show you've worked on?
There are loads for different reasons. You know, obviously I've been in the industry a fair while now, so there's quite a few projects on my IMDb list. Strangely, I find that whilst I've worked on some pretty impressive things, you know, Solo and Marvel projects, etc., Solo, Star Wars, I actually find that working on comedies is sometimes the best fun. And so I suppose there's 2 questions as to what's my favorite thing that I've worked on. There's almost break it down into 2 questions. What is the project that I'm most proud of having worked on, and which project did I have the most fun on? So I guess the things that I'm most proud of having worked on, then probably, you know, Rogue One, Solo, Mandalorian, and Spider-Man: Far From Home. All fantastic. Really, really proud of the work and proud to have worked on them. But then the shows that I've had the most fun on would actually be things like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2 and Paul back at Double Negative. And I think it was because when you're working on something that's funny, you can actually have a real laugh in dailies. Like I quite often on Turtles and on Paul would just get a shot coming up, and if he had a comedy line, I'd turn the sound up in dailies and we'd all just sit there having a laugh for 10 minutes before we got into sort of doing the visual effects reviewing. And I think I found that when you're working on a comedy, and if the content is funny and you're laughing about it in dailies, it makes for a fantastic atmosphere in the workplace. And so the shows that I've had the most fun doing are the ones that we had a bit of a laugh doing. So comedy. So Paul, the Simon Pegg and Nick Frost, and then also Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, which was an absolute riot to work on.
I think I'd agree with that. When people ask me, "Oh, what films you worked on?" I go, "Oh yeah, I worked on Mandalorian and Aladdin." But then when someone at work's like, "What's been the best show you've worked on?" I'd say Dollface, which is like a very little known TV show on Hulu. And it's 'cause it was a comedy and it was really funny. And I think another thing was that the team was really small. It was less than 20 people over each department. And when you're in such a small team, you all talk to each other very easily. And we would push through like 30 shots in 3 weeks because we all knew how to talk to each other. We all knew when we would be in, and we all knew exactly what we wanted from one another. And so the whole process, even though it was crazy and fast, it was really lovely and really fun to work with all those people. Lucy, what's been your favorite show so far?
Oh, well, if I have to pick out of the one I've been a part of, I'd have to just pick Tom and Jerry. Yeah, no, it's been great, but yeah, I've been on the same project since starting, so that's been really interesting.
Nice.
Fraser Churchill's a really good friend of mine, actually.
Oh, I do notes for his reviews every day, so that's a fun time.
Amy, you don't particularly work on specific shows, do you?
No, I don't. I guess we have a lot more of a studio-wide role. However, we do get a rota for the credits on shows, which I didn't know until I joined ILM, and I didn't know until I saw my name on the screen, which was even more of a surprise. And I was super lucky to actually get Star Wars: A Solo Story, which was amazing, because I know some of my peers were like, hey, why did you get a Star Wars credit and I didn't? But I mean, it's really amazing, and it's really fair actually, because obviously we can't all be on all the shows, but it's so nice that the industry recognise that, you know, the support roles are just as valuable. You know, we make a lot of things happen. People wouldn't be in the studio if it wasn't for HR and recruitment. So yeah, that was really nice. And I think my favourite one that we've done since joining, I don't know, I think Ready Player One had a whole different feel. And I think the design elements, the amount of CG character work that folks did on that was amazing. And just seeing the schedule kind of go from beginning to end was fantastic as well. Julian, do you have something to say on that one?
I feel like I'm answering every question.
Well, I heard you mumbling in the background, so I thought you must have something to say.
No, sorry, that was either my stomach rumbling or something, or me just moving around or checking something. No, sorry, I wasn't trying to interrupt you.
Cool. Let's move on to another question. How involved are directors with the VFX? Is a VFX supervisor like a VFX director?
That's a fantastic question, and actually, it's one of the best descriptions. To be honest, that is exactly what it's like. Yeah, as a VFX soup, my role is almost to be the director for shots that have got visual effects in, and quite often, you know, a prime example is, say, Spider-Man. The last two shots of the film where they're swinging through New York, those shots were my suggestion, my design, and I cooked them up and pitched them to the actual director of the film. So yes, that is sort of exactly what a visual effects supervisor's job is, to work hand in hand with the director to realize their vision. And something you sometimes have to remember as a VFX soup, that it isn't always your decision. It's not your creative vision. It is the director's. You know, everybody has a boss. Well, so I'm probably, a lot of people see me as their boss when I'm on a project. I have a boss, and even the director has a boss. You know, so in the context of Marvel, sometimes the studio are the ones making the creative decisions. But to come back to the original question, yes, we are extremely involved with directors. You have to get on board with their vision, get on board with their way of working as well. Some directors, you know, are totally happy to look at storyboards and previs animation, and then animation when you're actually doing the shots, looking at play blasts and things like that. Other directors don't understand the process and want to just look at renders. So you sort of have to get into the mindset of how you're going to work with the director and keep that director creatively happy, and keep things moving along as well. You can't sort of say to a director, this work's going to take 6 months, so we'll go away and leave us alone and come back in 6 months' time. They have to feel like they're in charge of driving the creative process. So, you know, you have to sort of work out how, if a director doesn't understand the visual effects process that well, what are you going to show them in the early stages, and how are you going to sort of keep them creatively engaged and stop them from freaking out that, you know, that you're going to run away and do something different to their project that they don't like. So that's all part of my job really, is how to, you know, how to realize a director's vision and keep the director happy at the same time, and sort of keep them on the hook creatively.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. Where are you based? So that's an unusual question because we're all working from home. So I suppose individually we're all based quite differently. Because I've moved home to move back in with my parents. Back in March I said, oh, I might be home for a few months, and now it's November. So, but I suppose where are our head of offices based? Our ILM is, we have a London office, a San Francisco office, a Vancouver office, and we have a Sydney office and a Singapore office. I'd say that the headquarters is probably the San Francisco one, but individually, London is my office.
It's perhaps worth mentioning here, actually, because this is perhaps, you know, related to COVID and the whole working from home, that whilst there is a slight change in terms of where people could work from, so if we're all, you know, moving to a model where people can actually work from home the whole time, you know, there's a compositor working for ILM right now who lives in Edinburgh, and he would never have been able to be working for ILM if we were in the office. There's no way you can commute from Edinburgh to London every day. But because he's decided to leave London and live in Edinburgh, he now can work. So there's a possibility that it means that, you know, the whole of the UK is now a viable place to live and still work in visual effects, whereas perhaps before it meant that you either had to move to London or maybe Manchester or possibly Bristol. I don't know. I think, and Glasgow, I think, were a few places that there's small visual effects facilities. Hopefully it means now that perhaps it opens opportunities to people who weren't in a position to, you know, do a Dick Whittington and sort of pack up their stuff and move down to London on the hope of being able to get a job, that you know, you can sort of do it from the considerably cheaper option of your sort of parents' spare bedroom or something. You know, and come back to what Corinne said about where we've got locations. I guess it is worth pointing out that, unfortunately, I don't think that anyone in the UK can apply to work for Weta and work for a company in New Zealand, and we can't, you know, and you can't work for ILM London if you live out in Europe or anywhere. You do actually still have to be in the same country as the people you're working for, even if we are working from home. So do bear that in mind for anyone who's thinking about applying for jobs in the near future.
Yeah, there has been a lot of discussion about people wanting to go home, but I think everyone, like, home to their, like, European countries, I mean, you know, yeah. I think it's all to do with the UK tax credit system for visual effects, and that if you want to take advantage of that tax credit, then you have to have the work done in the UK, and you have to be employing those people who are living in the UK. But I think Amy knows more about that than I do.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that one question we get a lot as well, and I know that Julian kind of knows a bit about this, is we get a lot of questions about visas. And I think one thing to say is, ILM does support people that are international. We have sponsored visas before. However, for juniors and graduates, we're unable to at the moment, just I think purely based on the way up with the fees and the funding and just what I believe it costs the HR department to sponsor someone. I don't specifically work in the visas department, that's more HR, but it's just something to bear in mind that we're just not able to do that at this time. So if anyone is watching that, say, you know, that lives in the States or has Canadian citizenship, that wants to come over here, it's just a little bit tricky at the moment. However, I would say try and get a job in the studio in that country. build up a reputation, sorry, and then you can always transfer, and transfers are a lot easier than starting straight out. I don't know if anyone has anything to say on that one that might have a bit more knowledge.
Should we move to the next question then? This is quite a good one, actually. Why do multiple VFX studios work on the same film? Do they specialize in different things? So I think different studios have reputations, I mean, of being really good at different things. Like some studios are very good at creatures and sort of set extensions and backgrounds and things like that. But I think it's mainly to do with the fact that one studio just can't do a whole film. It's too much work. And by divvying it up and giving it to different studios, that process of creating all the work is much faster than if you just give it to one studio with limited artists.
That's absolutely correct. And what I was going to say as well is that yes, it's a kind of a business decision, really. That you there's no way that one studio normally can commit to doing an entire film. From a sort of visual effects studio's business point of view, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. So you never really want more than half the team of any given facility working on one project, because there's always a possibility that even before COVID, films do suddenly get shut down or disappear. So you wouldn't want to be working, have the entire facility working on a film that suddenly got cancelled. So studios themselves never want to be doing more than having half their facility working on any given film, and the actual studios that are making the films don't want one facility working on their movies, because if that visual effects facility suddenly went bankrupt, they don't have a film. So you have to spread the work around, for financial reasons as well as time and creativity reasons. It is still the case, though, that certain facilities get the work because they're best at. So, traditionally MPC perhaps has been seen as a specialist in furry creatures, and for no bad reason either, because the work they've done on things like The Jungle Book and Lion King is pretty astounding. There was a point where perhaps Double Negative were known for environment work more than creatures and things like that, and ILM, I guess, have always been known for all rounders, creatures, environments, but particularly kind of space and big effects related work. ILM have a reputation for being one of the best facilities for delivering sort of big action destruction sequences where we can churn through hundreds and hundreds of shots, which some facilities perhaps might struggle with. So the studios and the client side visual effects supervisors do make a slightly informed choice about who they want to bid for sequences on a film, so that they kind of get the best of both worlds of getting the work to the best people who are going to do it, but also covering the sort of financial aspect.
Cool. I know some of us are needing to leave this call now, so I think we should just move to some closing statements. If Amy, you would like to start?
Yeah, it's funny because I graduated from AUB and have been in the industry a little while now. I kind of collected a list of tips from my graduating self, like things that maybe I'd wish I'd known coming into industry, not necessarily technically, but kind of from a personal standpoint. So I would just say be a light to other people, because it is kind of a small world, as it were. And actually, it's so nice when you have people around you that are really encouraging and supporting. So I just think you'll be blessed if you are a light to other people. I think be kind to yourself. That's another thing that not a lot of people necessarily know coming into industry. That feedback isn't personal. It's all to do with the vision of the director and the project. So I think the sooner you can get used to taking feedback on board in a kind of more constructive way, the easier it'll be for you to handle emotionally, I think. Create your own path as well. Don't always go with what everyone else is trying to tell you to do or what they're doing. I think I'm a real believer in kind of, like paving your own way and knowing what your dream is, and you will get there if you work hard and you're persistent. And I think the biggest thing is confidence. So like not giving up, because I've seen a few people that were my graduating peers that are still in the same town. They're they kind of lost their confidence to really reach out and apply and try and be resilient, because I applied for a job at ILM before I got one as a production assistant, and I'm so glad that it was a no, because then I got onto my master's degree and then onto a role that actually was right for me in the end, because I'm much more of an ideas person, and I think production would not necessarily be right for me. So a no isn't always bad. I'd also say be bold as well, like ask for help. Don't be afraid of that. I think there's no such thing as a silly question, especially when starting out. And I'm sure Jules knows, like it's good to ask questions, because if you pretend that you know, that's only going to be more harmful down the line. So, ask away. We're all learning, and you never stop learning, even when you're an executive and a supervisor. And I think as well, like, don't be afraid if you're not doing the thing that you really want to do straight away either, because there's so much room for learning. As an example, if you want to be a compositor, especially at bigger companies like Framestore and ILM, you're not going to necessarily come in as a compositor. The entry level route for us is paint and roto artist, and actually it's such an amazing route to come in, because you do get training at ILM to transition to compositing if that's what you want to do down the line. And a lot of the compositor supervisors I've spoken to will say, I'm either really glad I used to be a paint and roto artist, or I wish I had been, because it's a real bridge between to making you a good compositor. So never be afraid of taking roles that are slightly different or a lot more entry level, including runners. And we still have runners in the industry. It has slightly changed because we're not all, they're not all completely in the studio at this time, but we do have runners and the need for them. So that's also something that I wanted to just leave you guys with.
Thank you, Amy. Julian, you've got your talk next, so we'll go for you. What's your closing statement?
Well, there's not a lot I can say that Amy didn't cover there, really. It was a sort of fantastic, all-encompassing closing statement. So it's really just I would say to everyone, take that on board. I mean, I think my one thing would be to sort of anyone who's aspiring to get into the industry is perhaps like one of the things that I said right at the start of the talk, which is, be aware that visual effects is both a technical and artistic industry. And if you lean naturally to one or the other, make yourself a bit aware of the other side, because I think having a sort of as broad a set of skills and a broader set of talents as you have makes you more employable and more retainable, which I think is as important in the current climate. Everyone should have a specialism. Sorry. Everyone should have a specialism, but on the other hand, like I say, the broader the skill set you can have, the more attractive you are to future employers. So bear that in mind.
Yeah. Kate, any advice on the back of that?
Advice. Okay, from just a personal perspective as well, based on my experience. So, as a recent graduate who got straight into industry, it was a very exciting opportunity, because that is the goal, isn't it, to get into industry after you studied how many years to pursue the specific role in industry. But so it was, for me, after spending some time in industry and having to leave to pursue my master's, it was scary, yes, because you wonder whether you can go back into industry. But I think currently right now my mindset has shifted, especially because with what's happening right now in the world and with COVID. So for me, I just kind of took this as an opportunity and took advantage of it as, again, an opportunity for me to learn more. And that's why I'm pursuing games. And I really like what Amy said about being bold and just going for it. And that is what I'm doing right now. So I'd say for those people are interested to get into industry, and like you have that eagerness to learn, right now is the right time to do it, because we don't know how long this COVID is going to take over the entire world. So normal is definitely different now. So I would take this opportunity to learn more, same what I am doing now, and just make the best out of this year and then what's to come after, and before COVID ends.
Awesome. Lucy, closing statement.
So I guess what I'd like to say to kind of wrap up from me is that, from my perspective, after graduating, I didn't have a job for 6 months. So, I graduated and it was just kind of, what do I do now? Like, how do I go from like being in university to kind of getting into the industry? So basically, it's that the main thing I would say is that find a way to network with people. Like, find a way to, to talk to as many people as much. Obviously, COVID makes literal events in person a bit different, but, you're here on this panel at the moment, so you're putting an effort to try and figure out how to get to the job that you're aspiring to. So, I went to so many networking events, Access VFX, QVFX, SIGGRAPH, like all the drink and draws. And, that's how I met the right people that led to opportunities for me. And I'm sure that, reaching out to people on LinkedIn at the moment, or going through however you can to talk to the right people, will provide you with an opportunity that matches your skill set, which lets you, get to where you want to be. So I guess just keep going with whatever you're doing, and I'm sure it will work out.
Yeah. My closing statement now. I would probably go off the back of that, of what Lucy's just said about when you finish uni, you might not get a job straight away. And that was definitely my experience, that for a few months, I just didn't have anything, and I couldn't find anything in my specialty, which is layout and match move. And so I kind of toiled away, and every evening my parents would say, "How's the job hunt going?" And after a while I said, "You need to stop asking me that." And I think as well, it's also, same of what Amy was saying, apply for the jobs even if you don't think you can do them. Because I didn't apply for the job I have now because I saw it and I thought, I can't do half of what the job requirements are asking me to. I'm not going to apply. They'll just reject me. And then an external recruiter messaged me and said, "Hey, do you want to come for an interview for this?" And I went, "Yes, please." And I didn't think I was going to get that either. And then, come October, I've started working for ILM after I graduated, which is crazy for me. Also, again, I think Amy said all the best stuff, so I'm just picking the stuff she said. Ask loads of questions, go online, add people on LinkedIn, ask them questions. If you want to know more, again, there is stuff on the internet, but anything you can't find, just start networking with people. I think LinkedIn is the new networking, so that's the best way to go about it. What else? I suppose in terms of training, go out, look for some courses. I don't regret my degree at AUB at all. I'm one of those few people in my school friendship groups that can say that my degree was worth every penny, because I love the job that I do now. And I don't know, every day it's nice waking up knowing that the job I'm about to do is something I love doing. So if you are interested in visual effects, if there's something about visual effects that makes you feel passionate or excited, definitely do look into it. Anyone that says to me, "Oh, that might be something I want to do," I'm like, yes, please do look into it. And that's my closing statement. Thank you very much for listening in, for asking your questions. This has been a really enjoyable panel to be on. Thank you so much. And thank you to the Bournemouth Film School for hosting this as well. And thank you to Aesthetica.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Cool.